Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Storytime with Uncle Monkey. I am your Uncle Monkey, and today's story, by popular request, is Snow White. Once in midwinter, while the snowflakes were falling from the sky like feathers, a queen was sitting and sewing by a window that had a frame of black ebony. And as she was sewing, she looked up at the snow and pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of her blood fell onto the snow. She thought to herself that it looked very beautiful, the blood against the snow, and she whispered, "I wish I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the frame." Shortly thereafter she had a daughter whose skin was white as snow, whose lips were red as blood, with hair as black as ebony, and who was thus called Snow White. And when the child was born, the queen died. A year later, the king took another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and haughty and couldn't bear to be surpassed in beauty by anyone. She had a miraculous mirror. Whenever she stepped in front of it and looked at her reflection in it, she'd say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would reply, "Queen, you are the fairest in the country." That satisfied her because she knew that the mirror always told the truth. But Snow White grew up, becoming more beautiful all the time, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the bright daylight and more beautiful than the queen herself. Once, when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" it answered, "Queen, you are the fairest where you are, but Snow White is more beautiful by far." Then the queen grew alarmed and turned yellow and green with envy. From then on, whenever she caught sight of Snow White, her heart twisted inside of her, so greatly did she hate the girl. And envy and pridefulness, like weeds, grew taller and taller in her heart, so that she no longer had peace by day or night. Therefore she summoned a huntsman and said, "Take the child out to the woods. I don't want to see her face in front of me ever again. You are to kill her and bring back her lungs and her liver to me as proof." The huntsman obeyed and led the girl into the forest. But after he drew his dagger with the intention of piercing Snow White's innocent heart, she started to weep, saying, "Oh, dear huntsman, let me live. I shall run into the forest and never come home again." And because she was so beautiful, the huntsman felt compassion and said, all right, run away, you poor child." He thought to himself, "The wild animals will soon eat you." Nevertheless, he felt as if a stone had rolled off his heart because he didn't need to kill her. And when a young wild boar happened to dash by, he stabbed it, removed its lungs and liver, and brought them to the queen as proof. The cook was ordered to boil them in salty water, and the malicious woman ate them up, thinking she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. Now the poor child was all alone in the great forest, and she was in such anguish that she looked at every leaf on every tree and didn't know what to do next. She started to run, and she ran over sharp stones and through thorns, and the wild animals darted past her, but did her no harm. She ran as long as her legs could carry her until it was nearly evening, when she saw a little cottage and went to rest. Everything in the cottage was small, but more dainty and clean than words could tell. There was a little table with a white tablecloth and 7 little plates, each plate with its own little spoon, in addition to 7 little knives and forks and 7 little goblets. 7 little beds were placed against the wall in a row. They were covered with snowy white sheets. Because Snow White was so hungry and thirsty, she ate a bit of vegetables and bread from each little plate and drank a drop of wine from each little goblet. You see, she didn't want to take everything away from one person. How thoughtful. After that, because she was so tired, she lay down on one of the little beds, but none of them suited her. The first was too long, the second too short, until finally the seventh was just right. There she remained lying, commending herself to God, and fell asleep. When it was completely dark, the owners of the cottage arrived. They were the seven dwarves who hewed and dug for ore in the mountains. They lit their seven little candles, and now that there was light in the cottage, they saw that someone had been there, because not everything was in order as they had left it. The first one said, "Who sat on my little chair?" The second one said, "Who ate off of my little plate?" The third one said, "Who took some of my little loaf?" The fourth said, "Who ate some of my little vegetables?" The fifth, "Who jabbed with my little fork?" The sixth, "Who cut with my little knife?" The seventh, "Who drank out of my little goblet?" The first dwarf looked around, and seeing there was a slight depression on his bed, he said, "Who got into my little bed?" The others ran over and cried, "Someone's been lying on mine too." But when the seventh looked at his bed, he caught sight of Snow White, who was lying there asleep. Now he summoned the others, who came running over and shouted with amazement, fetched their seven little candles, and threw their light on Snow White. "Oh my heavens! Oh my heavens!" they cried. "How beautiful the child is!" And they were so happy that they didn't wake her, but let her go on sleeping on the little bed. The seventh dwarf slept with his companions, an hour with each, and then the night was over. When it was morning, Snow White woke up, and when she saw the seven dwarfs, she got frightened. But they were friendly and asked her, "What's your name?" "My name is Snow White," she replied. "How did you happen to come to our house?" the dwarfs asked next. Then she told them that her stepmother tried to have her killed, but the huntsman had spared her life. And she had run all day long until she had finally found their cottage. The dwarfs said, "If you're willing to manage our housekeeping, cook, make the beds, do laundry, sew, and knit, if you're willing to keep everything orderly and clean, you can stay with us and you'll lack for nothing." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart, yes." And she remained with them. She kept their house in order. Every morning they went to the mountains in search of ore and gold, and in the evening they returned, and their food had to be ready. All day long the girl was alone, so the kind dwarfs warned her, saying, "Watch out for your stepmother. She'll soon find out where you are, and don't let anyone in the house when we are not here." But after the queen thought she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver, she was sure that once again she was first and most beautiful. She stepped in front of her mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "Queen, you're the fairest where you are, but Snow White, who the hills did roam, and now lives with the seven dwarfs home, is more beautiful than you by far." Then she became alarmed because she knew the mirror never told a lie. And she realized that the huntsman had deceived her and Snow White was still alive. Then she planned and planned how to go about killing her. For, as long as she wasn't the most beautiful woman in the whole country, her envy gave her no rest. When she had finally devised a scheme, she dyed her face and put on the garb of an old peddler, so that she was quite unrecognizable. In that guise she crossed the seven mountains and arrived at the home of the seven dwarfs. Knocking at the door, she called, "Beautiful things for sale! For sale!" Snow White looked out the window and called, "Good day, dear lady. What do you have to sell?" "Nice things, pretty things," she replied. "Bodice laces of all color." And she pulled out one that was braided in colorful silk. "I can let this honest woman in," thought Snow White. She unbarred the door and bought the pretty lace. "Child," said the old woman, "how you look! Come here, I'll tie the lace for you properly." Snow White, who had no reason to be suspicious, stood in front of her and let herself be laced up in the new lace. But the old woman laced her quickly and so tightly that Snow White lost her breath and fell down as if dead. "Now you were the most fair," the woman said, not disguising her voice anymore, and hastened to depart. Not long afterward, toward evening, the 7 dwarfs came home, and how alarmed they were to find their beloved Snow White lying on the floor. She didn't stir or budge, and she seemed to be dead. They lifted her up, and because they saw that she was laced too tightly, they cut the lace in two. Then she began to draw a few breaths, and gradually came to life again. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, "The old peddler woman was none other than the wicked queen. Be careful, and let no one in while we're not with you to keep you safe." But when the evil woman had gone home, she went to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?"